Let's kick it off then, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to BS&BEER Canada, BS standing for Building Science. My name is Aaron Jones. I am a carpenter and a builder on Grand Manan Island in New Brunswick, Canada. A blower or not, and a student of building science. Tonight, where are we? I am drinking a East Coast Pirates from Cab OK. And I'm going to throw it over to Lori since she's my closest
All
neighbor.
right. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, so I'm Lori. I got a haircut this week, but nobody can tell because of the beautiful sculpting that this cropping does. I am in Halifax, so just over my shoulder here in the little blue Nova Scotia province. And I am an owner of an architecture company. I'm a passive house designer and educator. And today I was called a deep retrofit guru, which I liked that one a lot. I have lots of opinions about air and vapor barriers and lots of expertise. Um, they were quizzing me in the preamble before all you folks joined the show. So we'll see what I can contribute to the conversation. I'm going to hand it over to Justin.
Okay, I thought you guys were making your way west and we were going with Connor next, but we'll
Oh,
skip over to the prairies. I'm Justin Ott, owner of Element Construction in Saskatchewan. We do custom homes and renovations, high performance enthusiast, and spreading the word and educating about how we can be building better. Over to you, Connor.
Hey everybody, I'm Connor Malloy. I'm an educator in Toronto. We teach at me, myself, and I teach at George Brown College. We have a building and renovation technology program teaching students about best building practices, building science, and all that great stuff. I also do some training for Passive House Canada and have recently got back into building. This is a fun topic. We're going to talk about gobs of pookie as ways of air sealing, floppy bits, and other really technical terms that can help you with your air and vapor control. I can turn over to Thomas.
Hello, everybody. I'm Thomas Bolduc, building envelope professional for better portion of 30 years. I love the topic of airflow. It's one of my favorites as far as it goes, but really interested to look at the differences between vapor and air and some of the commonalities too, right? I'm here in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I am drinking a Dillon's gin, and I'm not sure exactly where they produce this. It is a product of Canada, though, because we're all sticking with the Canadian goods right now.
Okay, should we get started? Killer. So let me share a screen here. If Aaron,
Yeah,
you
absolutely. Let's dig into it.
you see that?
I can see that. This is the meat and potatoes of tonight right here.
So yeah, we'll just get started. It's 7:08, good time to launch into it. Also, if you ever want to have a boxing match image created for air versus vapor, ChatGPT is a beautiful thing. With a simple prompt, it generates amazing, amazing imagery. This is going on a shirt for me later. But air versus vapor. So you're here to talk about differences, how we can control them, or how we can create barriers towards them, as the code might refer to it, and really kind of have a discussion tonight around how we as professionals are approaching these terms, how we manage these in our projects, and then because we are Canadians, going back to the National Building Code to show where does this come from and how do we work as a group to interpret it. So agenda, we're going to have just a quick discussion around the topic, where they launch into just a bit of make this show me, don't tell me, and show you a few ways that we in our projects are interpreting, controlling air and vapor, and show you some projects from out west and also from the east here. And then, of course, Q&A. We're all here to ask questions, and hopefully we can give you some answers. So let's launch it with really what is the difference. This is something I struggled with in high school and then in university. It's in every building science book. It's on podcasts. It's in books. And we got a message written to us. This is what inspired tonight's discussion. Bing, bop, boom, 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 bop, bam, air and vapor, I simply don't understand. This is written into us by Kendrick Lamar. Big fan of building science, and he struggles with the same things that we struggle with. So maybe if you're not a big hip hop fan, we'll maybe listen to a building inspector. Aaron, do you want to share who, maybe not who this came from, but what kind of person this came from before we do the zoom in?
Well, um, I want to clarify just right off the get-go. This is not meant to belittle or put down the person that this came from, because in many ways, this email is copy and code language. And herein lies the reason that we're having this discussion tonight. But essentially, this email is an excerpt from something that was forwarded to us, well, sent to us from a code official. And I know if we're experiencing emails with confusing language coming from code officials, somebody else somewhere in Canada is going through the exact same thing. And I thought it was, a great idea to have an entire discussion on it, because moving forward, especially as our code builds forward, um, this is going to become more pertinent. Now, I know BC has its own code, Ontario has its own code. Here in New Brunswick, we are currently just switching to the 2020 National Building Code of Canada, which is Canada's model code. So, depending where you are, what it's going to be. But if we go back just very briefly, um, if you pay attention to the language here, it's wrapping vapor barrier, air barrier over the stud and sealing to the frame of the window. And that's just one sentence. So are we dealing with vapor there, or are we dealing with air there? If you've been around a while, we have products that can absolutely do both. But what is our goal by wrapping that? And this is where the confusion starts to lie. And I really don't know how to solve all of these issues with the code and with technical inspections, but I think education is going to be a key to it, and that's why we're here.
100%. And that's kind of like really the lead in for tonight is really it's as you see in this email from a code official, as we get into the actual building code itself, these terms are kind of mixed together. So are vapor barriers also air barriers? The answer is usually it depends. And how we look at this at the college is they can be if you understand the two and your vapor control is detailed to be air control, right? Often they're
Absolutely.
not. Often they're not. If you take a sheet of 6 mil poly and poke holes in it, is it still a barrier? The answer is no, right? And how much does that matter? So we as professionals talk about air tightness and talk about using blower doors as that email from the code inspector referenced. And we measure the air tightness of your building, and it's measured in air. One method or metric is air changes per hour. So under pressure, the building is pressurized with a fan, and we're counting how much air do we have to push into that building to pressurize it to a certain pressure. And the fan will tell you how much air does it have to push in and what's the leakage rate, right? As it's being forced out of those holes. This is often what a above code air tightness score looks like. So code for us in Ontario is less than 3 air change per hour. The average house, average new home that's tested though, tests well above that, more like 5 air change per hour. This is kind of what it looks like. Vapor control materials being put up, right? They're kind of like a sandwich. As long as the sandwich calls for mayonnaise, as long as it goes in the sandwich somewhere, I can check that box. But if the mayo's on top of the bread, you'd say your fingers are slimy. And in this case, we're calling for vapor barriers. It gets put in that wall. It's taped by a professional that might not know maybe this is also air control for this project. And it's not maybe detailed very well. And it's very, very common. You can see here that the fan's been put in. It's taped around that fan, but that fan has then been slid in afterwards by another tradesperson, not aware that that is maybe also air control. And why we keep saying air and vapor is in many cases, they can be the same material. And to back up a second, we're often the code is obsessed with vapor barriers. Air is mentioned until this last update a lot less than vapor barriers. We also have no requirement to test for air tightness. But all of us will here will tell you the order of importance of control layers is water first, then air, right? Then vapor, then thermal. Air comes ahead of that. This is why. The image on the left is a really classic graphic. So moisture is in the term, or sorry, in the form of vapor can move in two ways. One is through diffusion. So if you have, imagine a absolutely perfect sheet of drywall, has no holes in it screwed to your wall. There's no 6 mil poly behind it. There's no Myrex. There's no smart vapor control behind it. All it is drywall. What can move through that drywall through diffusion? That's just vapor moving through, diffusing through that half-inch gypsum. We can move about a third of a liter through a Canadian heating season. Now, that's diffusion, right? That's the barrier thing we're so concerned about with what the 6 mils doing. If we simply go and cut a 1 inch hole through that drywall and foreseeably through the 6 mil poly behind it, right, the barrier, we can now move upwards of 30 liters of water because air can move a lot more moisture vapor than diffusion can. So, and if you say, well, my projects, Connor, don't have 1 inch square holes cut in them. Yes, they do. If you're installing 6 mil or really any vapor control layer as an air control layer, and you have your drywaller come in as we do often, and they go up to your nicely detailed receptacle, right? You tape that vapor control membrane up into the box. It's perfect. You took pictures, you posted on IG, and they come in with a rotozip and they route out around it. It doesn't take much for them to hit all that beautiful taping with rotozip. So now you have a lot of little holes all over the building. So yes, diffusion's important and barriers are important, but air is really crucial in your fight against vapor. How much more? Well, 100 times, right? This is the factor, right? So vapor barriers, sure. But you got to manage air first. Air is more important. And when air can move 100 times the vapor that diffusion can manage, even with 6 mil poly, right? Class 1 retarder, if it's a barrier, it only works where it exists, but not where there's holes. Right? This is the big takeaway. So, Aaron, why don't you walk us through how supportive the code is for telling us how this works and what we should do about it?
Unmuting helps. So this is the problem. The code, unless you're willing to actually sit down and read it, becomes very confusing. And here we have in the very first sentence where the air barrier and vapor barrier functions are provided by the same layer. And absolutely true, we can use one product to satisfy both functions. And for a very long time in Canada, 6 mil poly has been that answer. Uh, how good of a job we've done of it depends on the installer, depends on who comes behind the installer of the 6 mil poly. And that also goes back to where blower door testing comes in extraordinarily handy and is extremely important. If we scroll on through, though, it talks about different materials we can use to achieve a air barrier or a vapor barrier. But specifically under air barrier systems, we talk about airtight drywall approach, sealed polyethylene, so 6 mil poly, a sealed joint method, a rigid panel method. Now, when it says rigid panel method, it just mentions extruded polystyrene here, but that also includes OSB, plywood, and a lot of other panels if you dig into the appendixes and basically the nitty gritty and the depths of the code book. Spray applied foams and painting or parging on concrete masonry or cast in place concrete. So basically, you're going to apply a parging or some type of elastomeric coating to concrete or masonry. Um, but it doesn't really give you a whole lot of amazing prescriptive methods to meet this. It just kind of glosses over the subject and it doesn't really define it as to, eventually it does define. I don't know if we have that slide, Connor. Do we have the slide where says where the air barrier is? Oh,
I
no.
think that's in the PDF.
Okay. All right. Anyways, this shows one of the prescriptive options for air barrier assembly testing, and it really doesn't get into uh, blower door testing. It does mention the 1 in 50 hourly wind pressure and talks quite a bit about stack effect, which the NRC has done a lot of testing on. But there is another, I wonder if I can come back to it, if I can find this slide where it talks about where your air barrier is. Um, because you have options in the code to install it on the exterior or the interior. But really, it doesn't matter where your air control layer is. What matters is continuity. Um, just looking here very quickly if
I'm
I
just down.
can find it. Hold on here.
I think it was a couple of slides back, and it talked about where the vapor barrier is, but I'm not sure if it said where the air barrier is, because really the vapor barrier needs to be on the warm side of the insulation. So that's what it said. Yeah.
No, absolutely. The vapor barrier does need to be on the warm side for us in our climate. Absolutely. Um, just looking for this because it does give you options. I apologize. We should have this slide right out front and center.
So
Um,
here's the other section of the code, Aaron, which is the second document, 936.10.
yeah. What you're looking at. Well, we'll have to move on here, and I will try and find it somewhere along the way here, and we'll bring it back up later. But basically, the code does give you the option for having uh, your air barrier either on the interior or the exterior. And I don't know if that is well known. I don't know if code officials truly understand that, a vapor barrier and an air barrier can be a different thing. Um, yeah. Anyways, oh, actually, it says it right there. My apologies. You probably already said this, Connor, and I was so busy looking for this that
So,
I didn't see it.
yeah, what I wanted to take from this is Aaron and I build things. I teach things. Aaron teaches things. We're all professionals. And if we are having trouble finding this stuff and interpreting it, everybody is. And I think it's the importance of tonight why this is a discussion and why the code is really limited to help your team members or your clients understand what the heck you're talking about. And because the importance of managing any of these things is reliant on really continuity and airtight building, um, it's really crucial that you start to, as a professional, share more than the code with your team because we get this mixed up too. So don't feel like you're the only one out there.
No, the code has been written in black and white for decades, but it has always been interpreted in shades of gray. And this is a prime example with the slide up here. Um, you know, it says right here, interior or exterior air barrier approaches, and a combination of both. And some of the materials that you can use for either or are right here. And of course, smart vapor retarders should be included in that. At least I believe they should be included in that. And if you read the 2020 code carefully, they are. And I believe in Ontario, they are also approved for use. I know in BC they are.
Yeah.
Oh, our foreign correspondent has joined us. Awesome.
Yeah, I can speak to that one when we talk about the Ontario project I have to share.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So,
But either way, the code does allow for interior or exterior air barrier.
yeah. So why don't we practice something called Show Me, Don't Tell Me? Justin, can you show us some ways that you yourself are putting in details in your projects to manage air and then talk about maybe which parts of those approaches you're talking about are managing air and which ones are vapor and maybe both? So how about we show some pictures? You tell me you do this with your thumb, and I'll click.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so what I wanted to share was an approach that we take on kind of like our entry level high performance build. And what we tried to do was we took an approach that we could not only do in-house with our carpentry team, but also on a scale that we could teach, a framing team or, an installation and a vapor control team. We do a lot of stuff in-house, but we're also, as we continue to grow, we understand the need to be able to train other individuals in the field and kind of like simplify it so that they're not running around to conferences and learning this, and they're just at the end of the day, like a framer's a framer. He's not necessarily wanting to pick up on all this, right? So one of the assemblies that we've found that has worked well for us is the zip system. So as you can see here, we got the Zip R9 on the exterior. This is a relatively basic home. It's got all-weather window package in it. It's from a conventional build, short of the green sheeting. You would think it would be just an average home that you'd see in Saskatchewan, right? We'll go to the next one, Connor, please. And same thing here. This was a budget-friendly build, if you will. So we used just a traditional 6 mil poly under the slab for our air and vapor. And then you can see we upturned with the little floppy bits. This one actually, because we weren't building in Regina, we were building out in the country where we had optimal soil conditions. We were able to use PWF foundation as well. So kind of removing some of that concrete features. You can kind of see up in the corners, we have a little bit of a floppy bit up underneath the trusses, which you'll see in the next slide. But I just wanted to give you an example of very traditional methods that you would see and maintaining that continuity. We'll go to the next one, Connor. And there you see just, a bit of that Intello flopped over so that we can grab onto it in the basement. And then, as you've seen in the first slide, we had our zip system. So we have that continuity. Basically, the way that we approach our air control, which, alludes to the conversations that we've had with our building officials is, in Saskatchewan, I'll be honest, I had never seen another project that have stepped away from a traditional 6 mil poly that they're using for everything. And really just doing it because that's the way we've built homes in Saskatchewan and not really understanding separating those and, what you're trying to control with one or the other. Whereas we know that by using the zip system in a way and in conjunction with a couple other transitions, we find we get a better control over our air control moving to the exterior versus the interior. And it's just easier to seal off different exterior penetrations, mechanical stuff, all that. We had to have some conversations with our building officials and trying to work through and explain that to them because, it was, hey, what are you guys doing here, right? It was a bit of a foreign thing for them. So we'll go to the next one, Connor. And so this is how we transition again on the framing side of things. So we actually take our zip tape and we're going back to the plate. And so, we do have floppy bits in areas, but there's other areas that we actually use the wood as our transition for our continuity. And if we go to the next one, Connor, you'll kind of see it. Maybe not in that one. Sorry. That one there. Sorry. You can see how now all of a sudden we've got this really nice continuity through our roof trusses, and then we attach our interior on the opposing side. And then we'll slide back to that one. Sorry, Connor, I give it to the green one. One more up. There we go. Yeah. So, as we're separating our exterior air, and we'll see on the interior what I call kind of a belt and suspenders approach to our air, but then also how we're transitioning our air and vapor across the ceiling line. you'll see from the first picture, we framed continuously through the entire building, right? And that'll all get taped before any of the porch, any of the deck roofs, anything was added on. And that's how we're maintaining, that big continuity piece all the way from that foundation up to that roof line. And that's, say for instance here, when I'm driving around our neighborhoods, the traditional builder is still using that 6 mil poly on the interior as a vapor and air control. And so you'll see just like bits of pieces of loose Typar or Tyvek on the exterior, and they're not really thinking of that continuity piece on the exterior like we are. So we'll go to the next. Yeah. And same thing in the spirit of trying to have conventional methods so that we could train like a traditional framer to come in and do stuff that's really not out of the norm. This project I wanted to show you, we've stuck that smart membrane in between the top plates. Normally you'd see a 6 mil poly there. This one doesn't show it because the boys, they had a couple cold days, so we didn't get to tape the top plates at that time. But normally that zip tape would fold onto those top plates, creating that continuity between the exterior air control and then moving on to the interior. And that's where we do our transition along that ceiling line, is really coming from that zip. And then very traditionally, again, just replacing that 6 mil poly that you'd see on your ceilings with a smart membrane. We'll go to the next. Yeah, right there. I just wanted to show kind of like what it looked like once the slabs were kind of poured, and you see the little floppy bits on the bottom and the little floppy bits on top, and that'll get insulated, and we'll have that smart membrane on the inside. And basically now you can kind of see that red line approach where we've come underneath our slabs, we've come up our walls, we've transitioned to that outside, and then now we're ripping up the zip system. And then you'll see where we come back across on the ceiling plane of the building. We'll go to the next. Yeah, so this is an image of the ceiling now. And so one of the things that we've seen obviously in the slide that Connor has is, you get 100 times more movement of vapor through air versus diffusion, right? So when we're looking at the importance of where we're minimizing our penetrations, we're coming up that zip and then we're coming across that ceiling. And now what we do to minimize the amount of penetrations in that ceiling, because now in this circumstance we are using it as a vapor and air control, we're strapping those ceilings out so we can keep all of that servicing, all the electrical wires, everything on that inside, and minimize any penetrations that we have through that ceiling, because we're asking it to do two jobs now, not just one like we are on those exterior walls. And then we'll go to the next one, Connor, and you can kind of see some of the rough-ins, and we just loop up and over all of that so that we're minimizing any of those penetrations. And then on the exterior walls, it's just a belt and suspenders approach to our air control and then our vapor control on that inside. So, when you look at this build, short of the products, it would look pretty traditional to what you'd see on the prairies, but we've kind of just broke out and identified how we want to outline that continuity and then where we are finding importance on this assembly. And this is where I go, we can have some pretty awesome projects and we can work with people that have big budgets for us to do really awesome stuff. But when we're trying to do projects at a very high level with people that have modest budgets, this is where we can kind of take traditional building practices and just incorporating details where it matters, right? And to give you a perspective, these builds all blower doored under passive levels, 0.28, 0.34, and they would, generally look like a traditional build that you could do with a framer or an average vapor control and insulator kind of crew, right? So, that was kind of me just giving a quick rundown of how we approach some of our builds at a more modest level, separating the air and the vapor. And, I think this is a system that could be scalable and achieved with, the massive trades with very little education.
That's awesome, Justin. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, I'll just share a couple things on something that we've just finished building, then we'll come back here and talk about a couple things you highlighted. One is a couple areas we'll have bring this to the group is a couple membranes. So 6 mil under your slab, you talked about it being air and vapor. And then as you came up the wall, we then separated the two between primary air on the exterior, and you came up to the top of the roof, and you came back again to a smart membrane being both air and vapor. So we should come back to that at the
Yep.
end. I'll talk through mine too. We'll kind of talk about how we're kind of separating these two. So another approach, tonight's discussion rather, depending where you are, is not deep and exhaustive into the different materials you can use for vapor control or the different materials you can use for air control. It's to give you kind of two case studies to visualize what we're talking about and ask questions. We'll do some follow-up episodes if this is all helpful and break it down further. For me, where we like to start with our teams, this is my personal build we just finished last week. We started on the drawings. It's really imperative that you as a builder, if you're getting a basic permit set from an architect or from a client, if it's missing all the connections and details, the best place to start is on paper. We often call this redlining the drawings, where again, air is number one, right? Well, water. Air is then next, and then vapor after. We're trying to draw, as long as you can draw that red pen around the sections, both cross-section and longitudinal, without lifting your pen, that's the goal. Every time that pen turns, makes a 90 or jumps between inside and outside, that's a change in material. We go one step further than just redlining. Our system for air control is a system. It's not a product. There's no aisle at Home Depot that says air control. There's one for insulation, one for lumber, but nothing for air. It's a system of parts. So we take our primary air control layer, which for us is typically always on the exterior, where it's easier to detail, and it's made of multiple materials. We then label our sections with colors, and then on site, we actually make a sign that gets zip tied to the construction fence. And we take all these weird materials, Stego and MyBest and Contiga and Fentrum and Wiglove, right? This makes no sense to most folks. The same way that Blueskin, Tyvek, Black Death made no sense to me when I was 16 and 20 years ago. So our job is to start to help to make sure things connect on paper. Otherwise, it's very hard to do on site. And second, make sure your team has the affordance to know what the heck you're talking about when you say, tape the floppy bit to the goopy bit and then do this on top, right? So we're working with them. So this is a slab on grade project. There's no basement. We have a really high water table. So we have 2 frost walls. That's all pretty standard. It's poured concrete. Below grade, we have lots of insulation. And where we start with is a layer of Stego. Stego is a 15 mil vapor control product, right? It blocks all that vapor drive from under that wet earth getting up into the building. And because we also want to manage air, right? Any penetration through that vapor control layer, if we tape all the seams and tape all the penetrations and tape all the pipes, we can make it air control. If I poke 1,000 holes in it, or as the concrete finisher today, it took a long time to finish. They wanted to poke rebar holes all the way through it to let water come through it. It's now no longer air control. So you're really defending this. It can be two things, right? We're trying to block that vapor drive from the earth, which is wet, into our nice dry building. And if we tape it really nicely, it can be air too. So it's where you have a material doing two jobs. At the exterior, notice that the finisher is like kneeling over like a floppy bit, is we want to make sure that these layers connect to one another. I've done this, well, the team has done a great job taping all the holes under the slab. If we don't take the outsides of it and turn them up and terminate or tape them into something else, it's really not a control layer for air. So we need to think about how long do we let that poly run past the slab so we have enough room to finish it. So these are all things we're thinking about ahead of time. And we're telling the trades, right? When you cut that poly back, leave 12 inches of it because we need that much to flop it up. Our air control, like Justin's, is on the exterior of the sheathing. This is a double stud wall framed with a exterior 2x6 load-bearing wall. We have a self-adhered membrane that we roll on the flat. It's much easier for us. We like self-adhered membranes. They work in the snow as well. They can be incredibly airtight. And we lay all this on the ground and we flip those walls up. As we kind of chase that air control strategy up, when we're joining floor sections, we're now jumping between these nicely tiled wall panels. We need to join them somehow and make sure we're thinking about air leakage. We have two ways of doing that, depending on your approach. A lot of us are familiar with like header wrap or wrap at that joist end. You can see the image on the left. This is the two-story detached house. When your team is wrapping these things, again, it's can be air control if it's sealed and terminated. This is folded like a present. We fold it like a gift. We tape all those seams. So when it's flopped inside, it is one continuous layer. The garage, we tried something different. We're trying a sealed sheathing approach. So before, the rim joist is often a very leaky place in the building. We can make the sheathing airtight, again, if we detail for airtightness. So where we have these junctures between walls and floors in second stories that are conditioned, we put beads of sealant. In this case, we weren't too fussy on which one. There's like 9 types in the building. They can all work for air control. There's some stuff from Henry on there. There's stuff from 475. But we pookie down all of those bands, and then we put that sheathing up as a way to not header wrap that section. So some of this, as Justin says, is you work with your team to see what do they like doing. Is it folding things to the present or the header wrap, or maybe it's using sealant and a sausage gun. Just like Justin, when we take that primary air control that comes up the exterior walls of the building, we need a way to transition it to the inside because we have a vented roof. So the roof is bringing air in through the soffits and exhausting air out through the ridge vent. So the attic is not an airtight part of the building. It's outside the building. So we need a way to take that airtight layer and connect it to the vapor control on the underside of the truss. And if we detail that well and connect it to the exterior self-adhered membrane, it can be air. So you can see at the top of the wall, we flop the exterior membrane over the top, so now we're connecting to the inside. And when we sheet that building, we've got these little floppy bit strips. We're trying to connect all these pieces together. So working with your manufacturer, a lot of these European membranes come in flat-foot rolls. They also sell sometimes pre-strips. So we buy some of the 18-inch rolls to make it easier on ourselves to make those junctures happen. I want you to notice one thing with this image. This house does have some overhangs and breezeways and kind of flat roofs. The whole building is framed in its entirety. That exterior air control layer, which is also water control, is connected first, detailed fully, before we start to, just like Justin did, apply all these details. So that rim or that ledger that holds that cantilevered roof, sorry, not cantilevered roof, just that roof section, that goes on after. The membrane is fully continuous behind it. On the inside, there's a few ways you can get air and vapor control on the bottom side of a vented roof truss. We tried taped sheathing on this project. You could use half-inch plywood. Debatable whether you can use 7/16 OSB as we did, but something to consider. We like this approach because the team who has never built an airtight building to this level yet, you can rock through the thing with scaffold and hammers and you can bang into the sheathing and not put holes through it the way that you can sometimes with sensitive membranes. So we just with a framing nailer set all those sheets of OSB to the bottom side of the truss, taped all the seams, and just like Justin to create a service cavity to run wires, we strap that ceiling down before we frame any interior partitions. So the workflow is really easy for the framers. Set a truss, sheet the bottom, strap it, frame your walls, right? Dead simple. Once we get to windows, we don't need, in this case, our air control layers on the exterior. We don't need to wait till insulation and interior things to get to airtightness. So when we set windows, we favor taping the window. Our team feels like applying that tape to the window to connect it to the exterior air control layer is easy for us. It's inspectable. So we pre-tape the window before it goes in. So in this case, we have really large European windows. We lift them up with a suction cup head on an electronic lift, and we tape them in the air. We run tape around the outside. There's lots of demos you can see on 475's website or Sega's website. And we slide that into the opening. it already has that tape to connect it to those exterior control layers, right? So the carpenter is thinking about plumb level square, and then your detailer comes in and pulls the tape and then connects those things. What it means is really early in the project, if you are going to use an exterior air control layer approach and you're working like this, it means from the point that you're framed, have your exterior membrane on, in this case, our WRB, so it's managing water and air. As soon as I set my windows in it and pull the tape, I have an envelope. That's my primary air control layer. So really early, we shove a blower door fan in it and we test it. In this case, we came out at 0.15 ACH 50 with windows, sheathing, and again, that OSB you saw up top. And that means that our risk of moving vapor and moisture through air leakage is pretty small. The total leakage on the building was a 2-inch hole, a 2-inch hole over 20,000 square feet of surface area. It's very little place for vapor to move through air. So with that out of the way, we did still use a variable permeable membrane. This is Sega's Myrex. If the wall gets wet or has a wetting event, it can dry out to the interior, where 6mm poly would be a barrier to drying potential. We like to detail it also nicely so it acts as a secondary air control layer. If that exterior ever fails, we have some resiliency here. And then to protect that layer, we then strap it. We like 2x4s on flat. That means all of the plumbing, electricals run inboard of that layer, and that layer is like my second cousin. I love them a lot, and we don't put holes through it, right? So to protect these things is important. And then your trades come in, right? They dense pack, they insulate. We did some interesting things. There's lots of, I mean, we all have details. This is how we detail. So that's walls. How we detail TGIs. We do a lot of engineered floor joist floors. We're now trying to get rid of 2-pound foam on our projects where it doesn't make sense. And we're trying to dense pack where we can. So we actually cut plywood baffles. And then so plywood can act as a smart vapor retarder. It's also airtight. If we caulk and seal it into that joist end, we've got a airtight smart vapor control that a carpenter can install. It's set with a framing nailer and you seal it in with some Pookie, right? Pretty nice. And then you test it again, right? And you get to the end and you test it again. And the idea here is what we're trying to separate is if we can start to manage the air control layer on the exterior and get the carpenters to do these things earlier, we can get to that test earlier than waiting for conventionally framing, then rough ends, then insulation, then your air and vapor control. You're waiting really months into the project. As you can diagnose early, learn what works for you, and start to separate the two. I think I'll stop talking there. How about
Um, we are getting close to the top of the hour. And I don't know if Lori, did you have some slides that you wanted to share as well?
No, actually, I didn't do my homework, but also this is amazing. Mine would have been redundant anyways. What a master class in detailing, guys. I liked that last one, your TJI air sealing detail. You
that?
know, wherever you can get rid of the foam. That's great.
Yeah, it's
Heading
all
into the Q&A, I'm not even going to play the full video clip, but I'm going to play a little video. And I'm, we're not even going to say whether the cause is air or vapor, but I think in the Q&A, somebody should be able to decide whether the cause of this is air or vapor. Get this going here.
Aaron, if you have an external mic, you might have to change the audio setting. Or maybe just walk us
Yeah,
through the
I'm trying to get to that here. My bad.
It's okay. Can
Maybe
you,
you just
can you
remember what
talk?
you said before. You can just,
Anyways, you know what? I don't even have to have that video play any further. Um, Everybody can see the frost that's happening here. So the question is, this is in a renovation situation. You can see the leftover bits of fiberglass that are still um, adhered to the frost, adhered to the nails. Is that frost formed there because of air or vapor? We can play a little more.
I don't want to be a know-it-all. I want to see, do we want to take a, we should have one of those polls.
Poll would be good for sure. Yep.
I'm gonna stop this, and there we go. Now, to be fair, it's a renovation situation, and not everybody was able to see the full picture of the dissection as we got to that point. But what I would say is there was a vapor retarder in place. I won't necessarily say it was 6 mil poly because it wasn't. It was poly, but it was not detailed in any way, shape, or form. And having done further renovations on that building, I know that there is no exterior air barrier. So, if, in case you're wondering, I'm basically saying this was an air problem, not a vapor problem.
Yeah. If you poke holes in a boat, it's not a boat, right?
Well, it was substantial holes. We're not talking, we're looking after vapor under a slab and somebody walking on the 6 mil poly created a couple little holes and we've got, you know, air leakage, but not a vapor problem. 6 mil poly. Oh, I don't know if anybody can see that. Foggy's coming for a visit. Okay, thanks, Gina. Anyways, 6 mil poly is excellent vapor retardant, amazing, but it's not necessarily a great air control layer. It's if you are exceptionally detail orientated, you can do an exceptional job at it. And I alluded to this earlier in our conversation where that was a huge part of the R2000 program in many areas was extraordinarily well detailed poly. And, anywhere you go and you really dig into the building science, whether you go to, the NRC, go to the Building Science Corporation, you will find stuff where in Canada we've done an exceptional job of detailing our 6 mil poly and making a very good air barrier, even though we thought we were detailing for vapor. And this is where the confusion lies. So I think we should, unless anybody else has got anything, I think we should dig into our audience and see if anybody's got any questions for us. Or if we missed any questions. Mr. Mark Willie has a question.
I have one exactly on the conversation that you just had with the R2000 in respect to the example shared by both Justin and Connor. I don't know if anyone on here in the days of following that prescription, did anyone also use strapping when doing a poly or a 6 mil poly or with doing a Tyvek Typar? Because that's another benefit that often is overlooked is, that buffer space, but also that air drying potential space. So I'm curious if any of you have tried that or even with a double layer of felt.
So strapping, especially on ceilings, has always been a thing. Any place that I've built, I can't speak specifically for Justin or Connor or even Thomas, but in the western portion of Canada where I have built, and in Atlantic Canada where I've built, strapping out the ceiling has always been a thing. Strapping out a wall on the interior, that just kind of depended what was going on. But the exterior, it really just kind of depended. But one thing I should mention to Justin, because he talked about 6 mil poly and he had never seen anything other than 6 mil poly. To be fair to Saskatchewan, the first thing Harold Orr did on any project was wrap it in 6 mil poly. That was the first thing he did. And if you don't know who Harold Orr is, I highly suggest you Google him. The difference is Harold knew that he wasn't applying a vapor barrier, he was applying an air barrier, and he knew that he had to have X insulation based on the product outboard of that 6 mil poly. So, but if you're looking for a pioneer in our industry, Harold Orr, look him up.
Yeah, and you're not wrong, Aaron. So Saskatchewan Home Warranty's done a lot of research on air tightness of the home builders that belong to the warranty program. And we are pretty much consecutively building under 2 ACH50 in Saskatchewan, just as a general detail. And it's just out of like basic habit in Saskatchewan that this is how we detail homes. And we've just naturally been able to, get under those numbers. And that was some statistics the home warranty program did.
I think something I'll mention I see from teaching students about this and teaching professional workshops is when we have professionals coming and taking training, if they've come from conventional building, right, TAVEC and 6 mil poly, something happens when you hand them a high performance material, right? Something Swiss and German or something from Huber. They treat it differently. It's this special thing they want to learn about. And the tape has different palpability and like all these things make them get really committed to it. Nothing's different in terms of it's a staple on membrane and it's got tape that goes together, but there's something that happens because it's perceived as more expensive and special. There's this dedication that happens. And I think the same thing happens when you give a Porsche to a 16-year-old. The way they drive their mom's minivan is maybe fast and loose. You give them something fancy, and all of a sudden you're still driving, but there's greater care taken to it. I think if we can take that kind of care and attention that we put into high performance products and membranes, there's no reason why we can't do that with conventional materials, right? We don't only need to use high European things to then care, right? Is we can start with everything we have available to us.
We definitely can. And she won't speak to it right now, but before we were able to get smart vapor retarders on a regular basis, working with me on vapor barrier day was not always a fun time because it had to be done very specifically in a very certain way. And there couldn't be wrinkles, and it had to be tight, and it had to be just so. And if your vapor boots on the boxes didn't pull out in a certain way and get acoustied and tape sealed in a certain way, coffee wasn't going to save you. You could show up with coffee, but it wasn't going to save you. But you're absolutely right, Connor. The material shouldn't matter. The process and the understanding of um, the basic functions behind what we're doing, whether it's a sealant or a tape, it's what is the goal? How do we achieve it with the products we have on hand? That's actually Thomas. So I have a bit of commercial background. You have more of a commercial background than I do. And in many ways, at least my personal opinion, um, the building science in commercial construction often pushes residential construction, especially when we're talking air and vapor. Maybe not the language, but the products definitely do.
Products for sure. Language, definitely not. As far as it goes too, the residential market's really been skipping along when if you're doing a comparative commercial. Commercial's still kind of lagging behind on some of the stuff. You'd think that it would be a little bit more on the forefront, but I guess it's one of those situations too where every job is a little bit different and it depends. You know, you got specifications and everything else to kind of play into that role as well. I don't have that one. That's a good one.
I missed that one by like this much. There and that's a one-off. There's no more of those apparently. So
I think too, there's still quite a few pioneers that are in the field and looking to make some moves in both the residential and the commercial realm. It's just sometimes it's getting the officials on board and getting to see it from your point of view and understand the BS behind it. Any chance to get, a little bit of BS education out there into the industry too. It always helps, right? Creates the conversations and creates the questions and hopefully, the answers at the same time, right?
yeah, 100%. Depending on where you rate the control layers, the order of importance, I think we all agree that water is the most important. We have to keep water out. And I think we can all agree that air is next. And the beautiful thing about a blower door test is if you have, 500 CFM of movement in your building, you're probably not doing a great job of keeping water out either. If you're down in the neighborhood of, I know, below passive, the hole in your house, depending on the volume, is, minuscule. So you're probably not letting a whole lot of water into your house either. Once we go past that, whether thermal or vapor is next, I don't think it really matters as much if we've dealt with the first two very well. Keep water out, you keep air out. We give it a nice, cozy, warm blanket inside and out, or just a really big, heavy coat outside. I
Can
don't
can
think it matters after that.
can I ask you all a question about how you run your jobs? We talked about the importance of detail, the importance of continuity, importance of air over vapor. Sometimes that's up to the GC, sometimes it's up to your trades. But how do you run it? Do you have an air boss that's responsible on your jobs? Is it you as the owner train, or is it the subs? Just walk me through who's responsible for air control for you.
For myself, that would be me, and me. Um, but I'm also very fortunate, and not everybody is on the job site every day. I'm not involved in the entire design process because Gina plays a huge role in that.
Mm.
But once, we've got the shape of the box nailed down and, you know, some of the details sorted out, like we know kind of sort of how big the windows are going to be, uh, then, I get to have input. And okay, are we going to use this product to detail that? Are we going to use that product to detail that? I play a role in that. Some of it is price, performance, and availability.
Yeah.
That plays a factor because every project has a budget. Then, what type of job do we need it to do, and is it available?
Yeah.
What's the alternative?
Lori,
But there is always a plan.
yeah, that's great. Lori, for you, when you're getting your drawing sets, which are really well detailed drawings, how do you find the builders are executing your projects? Is there someone responsible? Is it someone in-house? How are they doing it?
Yeah, they would typically, I mean, I think they do have somebody who's responsible, but I also a lot of the builders that we work with, I think there's like two categories, I would say. There's a couple of crews who are um that they're executing these assemblies that are kind of like they do on the regular. And so while they have somebody who is responsible, they also like know that everybody on their team knows that they're going to be held to a standard and they're going to have to pay attention where they need to and do them. Um, that way. And then we have a couple of builders who are also kind of like Aaron, where the owner is right in there all the time. Um, and maybe uh, the crew isn't as trained as rigorously, but that owner is holding their smaller team, and they're really working closely together and holding hands. So it depends on I need one of those. I was like, I want to get a sign. um yeah, it does depend, but like when it doesn't go well, I can think about a project a couple of years ago that we did where it was a new passive house builder. They hadn't done one before, and they were a bit cavalier about it, and it showed on the on the air tightness test. Like there was a call put into airtight spaces, which is our aero barrier installer here. So it definitely you do, having a plan is like the critical thing there. Like what's going to happen. And if you don't know you know, you don't have a plan at the start of construction, you're probably not going to hit that result.
Yeah. Something we've had people ask us about where we are in Ontario is for those companies who don't have maybe experienced teams in-house yet to do all the detailing. Does anyone here use or know of companies that use an external like Airboss to come in and detail and kind of manage that strategy? Anyone know of that happening in their region?
That would be amazing.
So
I know a couple of companies that guarantee air tightness, and they only deal with envelope and thermal layer, but nothing specific to come in after the fact other than aero barrier.
there is a movement in Atlantic Canada to create a micro credential course for an air boss. Um,
That's
whether it comes to fruition or not, I don't know. But
yeah,
hopefully we see that happen.
I know Fias has just launched their first pilot of their new envelope specialist program, which sounds really encouraging. Because I think we're all struggling with this idea of if you don't have that in-house knowledge with you, Aaron or Justin, really managing and you're, as you said, going to shows, doing the learning, how does the average builder, right, building millions of homes per year, do this? Because it's not just your air control layer as a system of parts, it's a system of people. That under slab layer is probably put in by the concrete company with tape sheets of Dow SM. Then when you're doing the framing, it's the framer putting on Tyvek or some kind of WB. Then it's the window installer that was subcontracted connecting the window to the envelope. Then it's the drywaller who's doing also insulation and vapor control. After that, like, do they all know they're making the air control layer? I think in many cases they're not. And how do we kind of break down this to just make it more accessible? That's something I think about.
Education is the key. I mean, we all know this. We do, but and we say it. The problem is, who are we speaking to when we're educated? Because you're going to have in any walk of life, you're going to have a group of people that are going to gobble up that information. As much information as you can give them, they will take it. Then you're going to have another group of people that, yeah, well, I'm here, I'm going to do what I'm being paid to do.
Yeah.
But beyond that, that's about it. You want me to tape the tape and squeegee it or roll it? Great. You want me to do anything beyond that? Well, who knows? And then you're going to have the other people that are just really not interested in any way, shape, or form. But how do we bridge that gap? I don't know if you ever will. Maybe we can give them a
I, th
badge.
I think we can bridge the gap with the floppy bit, right? Is that
Oh,
where
it
we're
doesn't show.
I was thinking about a beer fine. Every hole is a beer fine. You pay up at the end. If this is your scope of envelope work, every hole I find, that's a beer.
Peter's got his hand up. Peter, you want to ask us a question?
Go left a little closer.
You got to unmute, Peter.
Yeah, Peter, you're welcome to unmute and turn on your camera. We can see your lovely face.
That's better. I thought I'd done it and I hadn't. I actually pushed the buttons. Um, Asking Lori if on your architectural drawings for the build, do you put in detailed notes on instructional procedures to do this, do
Mhm.
this, do this, so that it's never mind that it's passive house or tested or not, that if they follow those instructions, it'll approach passive house standard just because.
Yeah, we would, I mean, as an example of that, I mean, a lot of architectural sets you might see, the Intello membrane, say, and just an arrow pointing to it and a layer. But we will have instructions like, lap the membrane over, into this opening and seal in this particular way. So we do have, I mean, sometimes the drawing sets just get a little bit bigger because there's a lot more words than you might see, but we try to be explicit, because also I don't know, that you've got a set of drawings that you've had on a house for months and months, and also the paper starts to get a little frayed and things get fuzzy. So we do spell it out as much as we can. And if it's, we kind of decide what we say about those things in shortly after a builder is chosen by an owner. We'll have a constructability meeting and we'll kind of walk through the details, and we might revise some of the text if they basically the questions they ask us indicate things that we should be a bit more explicit about in the drawings. So, and we weren't always like that, but like our process has evolved because we want to be really clear. And it does help for sure.
Yeah, that's really good for someone who doesn't know about the or the area of high performance buildings, but if they follow your instructions and the details are there and given, they'll get there without, they'll follow the education later.
I think, Peter, that's a great question. And just pick up on something Lori said. Lori, we're very generous to have you share some drawing sets with my class this past
Mm.
year. And I think what we see as, builders and learners is the drawings only show you the wall in its completion, right? All 17 layers. It doesn't tell you what comes first, how big the floppy bit is, or where it gets taped to. We did have fun actually taking Lori's drawings and having the class break them down, something that we call, I'll just share this with you quickly, called digital field guides. It's basically a Lego set for an assembly. We teach the whole school, or our classes, how to do this now. And imagine a Lego set or like an IKEA drawing where it takes that drawing. We format it for an iPhone in portrait so that the carpenter in their pouch up on a scaffold can flip between the phases. So this is back to the project I shared. So wrap the Stego 4 inches past the foundation, cut the bolt holes. If you make a big slit, use some Contiga. Each slide calls out the product name on the slide and then what to do with that. Then you add your sill plates, then you frame your walls right. We're specific to the layers of material, which one gets lapped first, so bottom first, then top. And then because it's all about the floppy bits, we want them to lift up the subadherent membrane, flip up the stego, terminate the stego to the sheathing. We taught the whole class how to render using all the high-res graphics from the manufacturers, flip it down, tape it with Ventrum, and then keep going. We found this kind of affordance on site was really helpful to show the team the sequence of the project, as you talked about, Peter, because it's the hardest part for any project, right? Whether it's backsplash cabinets, details in the interior, the outside and the control areas is just as hard. So, but that's something we found has been really helpful.
Yeah, that's very cool, Connor.
Yeah. I'm like, I want that. I'm not even going to build anything, but I.
Well, we've got a student here tonight. We're there. We'll ask if they can share the work back with you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, fabulous.
Well, I know this was an amazing show because we've gone into overtime
Mhm.
and, you know, we, anyways, we have just scratched the surface of this. So if somebody would like to see another show on air versus vapor, we would happily indulge you, because a multitude of us haven't shown any of our details. And yes, it always depends. It always
I'm
depends.
like, It could be a quiz show. You could just show more pictures of mold and say what caused this, and we could all have a debate.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't even get into any of my like really gross pictures.
Let's do that one, Aaron, next time.
Yeah.
Halloween.
Ooh, that's spooky.
What caused
That's
this?
amazing. Okay.
We can share
Air
some.
versus Vapor, the horror show.
That's a
All
great
right.
sequel.
I think we know what's happening in October, folks. Um, I think we're unless there's any other questions from the audience, um, I think we'll wrap it up.
Killer.
Unless anybody has anything further, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us on BS&BEER Canada. Absolutely, go buy Mr. Mark Willie's book. You can too. ABCs of Construction Tech. It's amazing read. It kept me up all night. I couldn't put it down. I read it twice. This
You're right.
doesn't show. It doesn't show well.
Got to hold it right in front of you.
Killer. For those of you traveling next,
Anyways,
for those of you traveling next week to JLC Live, who's going to JLC Live? Just so we know who friends are there. Aaron, you're going. Mark Wheeler's going. Justin's not
uh,
coming.
if you're making it to JLC Live, you will find me hanging out with Ben Bogey, our building science friend from the BS&BEER show just south of the border. And we might be in the neighborhood of some high performance zone. And Mark Willie will be there.
I heard a rumor that the Sean St. Amour is driving down with you, Aaron. That's what I heard.
Mark, no, no, no.
All right, sorry.
But yeah, if you're going to JLC Live, definitely check out Aaron's presentations at the high performance stage. They're wonderful, they're accessible, they're in person, and it's a small format, so you get up and close and ask questions if you're there. If you see Mark, say hi. I'll be there wearing all black, of course. Come up to me too. I'm not terrifying. And we can chat.
If you're coming from Canada, bring Mark Willie a refill. He's hard up for some Tim Hortons.
The beauty is 4 days later, if it's reheated, it tastes the same. You know, it's like Spam. It travels well. Okay, should we wrap it up?
Yeah, travel safe, everybody.
Awesome.
All right.
See you
Until
next
next
month.
time, folks.
Bye.
We will see you on the next third Thursday.